let's go on to. I have here on the list red car. This is a great story. I would love for you to share this story with the audience. So go for it. I'm just gonna let you go.
Yeah, so this was relayed to me by my parents when I was much younger. Um, I was in the car headed home from school. My mom had picked me up, and we were heading back, and we pulled up at a red light. And right next to us at the light was a red car that pulled up right next to us with a black family in the car. And in the seat behind the driver was a little black girl who saw me and started waving hi to me. And I saw her and kind of turned away and didn't acknowledge her. And then my mom said, "Hey, don't you see that little girl waving at you?" And I angled away from the window, started to give her the cold shoulder, and I was saying like, "Yeah." And my mom's like, "Oh, well, you need to wave back. Why aren't you waving back? She's waving at you." And I'm like, "Well, I don't want to." And my mom smelled, blood in the water, and she knew, hey, this is her chance to really like nip racism in the bud for me. And so she was persisting, like, "Hey, why aren't you saying hi?" "Well, I don't want to. I'm not going to." And she kept poking and poking and poking, and I was like, "She's different. I don't want to because she's different." And my mom is really like leading me down that path of like getting me to out myself and then come down and correct me. And so she finally pressed it so much that I was like, "She's in a red car. I don't like red cars." And, and then my mom had no idea what to do about that. Uh, it wasn't because she was black. It was because she was in a red car.
It was about color, though.
I'm a carist. Yeah, I'm a carist. Uh, so yeah, there's a couple stories from my childhood that really illustrate that I had no concept of race or anything. Another good one that's on this list was I might have told you about this, but my mom picked me up from maybe my preschool or kindergarten or something like that, and was asking how my day was, and it's good. And we saw the principal, and she asked how the principal was, and I said, "Oh, he's good, but he smokes too much." And my mom knew the principal from like a church social group or something, and he was a dark-skinned black man. And she says, "What? He doesn't smoke." And I said, "Yeah, he smokes way too much." Because when I was a kid, I thought black people were people that smoked too much, and the smoke like got in your skin and made you darker. And so because he was so dark skinned, he must be smoking way too much because he absorbed all that smoke. So just like silly stuff. But very illustrative that I have no clue what's going on, and I still feel like I barely have a clue what's going on in any day per day, situation.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important for people to understand that it's not like you grow out of this stuff, right? Like, I think people think of that scenario you just described as being like a thing that kids go through, but adults go through the exact same thing. It's not something you outgrow. It's something that you can create a system to counteract. It's something that you can, get better at not falling into those traps, but the traps will still be there and your brain's still going to be your brain. So like it really just depends on how skilled you are at navigating, when you're ignorant about something, and when you're learning something. And for me, as a master, if I do say so myself, learner and teacher, I think that I have a really good grasp on it. So it makes it a little bit easier for me to create this type of show. It makes it a little bit easier for me to communicate about these issues. But for people who have a harder time, I really think they need to be able to view a conversation like this. I had a message from a woman recently. We did a conversation with Jenny, one of my recent guests, about the recent hate crimes against Asian Americans that have been increased, um, as a result of some of the political rhetoric against Asians related to the coronavirus, in addition to all of the injustices that Asian American community was already facing, before that. And so I got a message after that conversation from a woman who thanked me for having that conversation because it's the conversation she wished she could have with her own friends. And I
Yeah,
was
wow.
just like, when she said that, it's kind of what we were talking about earlier, right? Which is that, like, there are all these people who feel like they can't speak, who feel like they can't tell their stories because people don't really want to hear it. It's so painful. Like, I think that, it's what you said before. It's tied up with emotion, right? But like people think because something's tied up with emotion that it can't have a significant impact, or like you should just be able to get over it, or this and that. But these things have a cumulative effect over time, and the effects can sometimes be insidious in that you can't really recognize them yourself because it happens slow and steady over time. And then all of a sudden you're someone you don't even recognize. And this happens in many contexts, right? Not just in the race
Oh yeah.
context. So I just think that we gotta all be so careful, not necessarily in engaging with the conversations, but in making sure, as you said earlier, that we remain open, because that openness is what allows you to catch errors. Really, like that's what it comes down to. Leaving yourself open to the possibility that you could be wrong is what allows you to catch errors. And this is how I teach mathematics too to my students. A lot of times they're like, "Oh, you're just a genius at mathematics. That's why you've always been a genius at it, and that's why you're." I'm like, no, 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 no. Like, the reason I got to the level of mathematics where I am is because I had a realization, and that realization was that mathematics is definite, that everything has a reason and a rule for it. As long as I learn all the reasons and rules, and as long as I check for any mistakes that are made based on human error, I can never get a math problem wrong. And I just have to consistently do that. Or rarely get a math problem wrong. You can't be. We're not
Yeah, yeah,
robots.
yeah.
We're not robots. That's just like how it
Not yet.
happens. But I show people, and when I teach it, if I'm doing something on the board or something, and I make a mistake, I highlight that mistake for my students because I want them to see, like, even I can make the mistake. I go over how I caught my mistake. How did I recognize that I made a mistake? We talk about that stuff too because it's just as important as learning the math itself. And I encourage people to think the same way about learning about race. As you're gaining more and more knowledge and more understanding of, the racial climate that we're all living in, your place in it, your friends, your family's place in it, everyone's place in it, make sure that you're also investigating your original thought process, the origin of it, what was good about it, what needs adjusting about it. If you don't do both of those things, you're just going to end up falling back into the same patterns that you were in before, just with a little more knowledge than you had before. So that's my little warning there.
Yeah, very, very true. There's a shift in thinking that instead of thinking like, well, what do I know about all this stuff? Maybe thinking, what don't I know about all this stuff is going to be helpful.
That's helpful no matter what you're investigating.
Yeah.
You should always the thing that trips people up a lot of times in a lot of different contexts and circumstances is not knowing what they don't know. Right? If you don't know what you
Right.
don't know, then there's no way of really navigating a system where that universe of thought is not only prevalent but like critical to your success in whatever it is you're trying to do. You're not going to be successful because of your ignorance unless you're really lucky. And so we want to get people out of that posture. We want people to be in a posture where they feel like they're educated about these issues, or at least gaining education about these issues, where they feel comfortable talking to people about them, and whereby if something is introduced to them that makes them uncomfortable, or where they feel like it's not within their current universe of knowledge, that they decide to go investigate instead of immediately dismissing it because it makes them feel uncomfortable.
Yeah. Yeah, and examining the reason why it makes you feel uncomfortable is really important too. That's what I'm trying to figure out now, is kind of that concept of white fragility, and why are white people kind of scared to talk about race deeper than kind of the cancel culture or the, words being used against you. But why is there such a reluctance to be open and receptive to Black experiences, instead of, the common phrase, like we've said earlier, about, oh, they need to pull themselves up, or they just need to, like, go out and get educated and reach that potential, and then they'll be fine, like they're doing this to themselves.
Well, I think that narrative that you're talking about, it's a historical narrative, right? It's something that has persisted through generations. So this is why knowing the history is so important, because understanding the reason why that persists is a little bit easier if you can backtrace it all the way to its origins, right? Which is that the slaves were freed, and then it was basically like, okay, like everything's fine now, right? Like since that
Right.
time,
Yeah.
since that moment, there has been this refrain of, well, now that you're no longer slaves, you should be fine. And if you're not fine, it must be because you are doing something wrong. And that has persisted all the way to now, almost 150 years later. So, I mean, I don't know. The world has changed so much. Black people have so many more opportunities in this country. I was born with my full citizenship rights. The first person in my family to have, the second person in my immediate family, because my brother was born first, but you know what I mean?
Yeah. I know what you mean. I wasn't going to say nothing.
The first generation to have our full citizenship rights. I mean, I don't know why people are so quick to say that we should be over all this when that's a fact.
It's something that white people don't think about because we haven't had to. And that's kind of surprising to me to even hear now, is thinking that your parents didn't have the same equality as my parents did. It is very weird to hear, because like you said before, hey, we had the Civil War, good guys won, now we're all equal, and that was a long, long, long time ago, and now, everything's good. And it's really not. And your point just now really illustrates that. Like, just, I'm gonna have to like think deeper about that, and that kind of effect.
Yeah, like I mean, my dad grew up in Boynton Beach, Florida, and like there were segregated swimming pools. It's or his experience with the military where he didn't get the benefits that he was owed. There's all kinds of things, and every Black person has these type of stories like in their families. So people are always like, well, how do you know that all Black people are going through this or whatever? It's like we all have similar experiences and we communicate about them with each other. And so we know what's going on. That's the simplest way that I can put it. A lot of people don't think that that's a reasonable way of coming to conclusions. And I understand it's limiting, but if I can go on a YouTube video about race and I can watch the video, see a story in that video that I personally have experienced, just any random video on race, then look in the comments and read a comment about other stories that I've directly experienced, that is meaningful. That is a meaningful data point. Of course, it's anecdotal evidence, but the fact that that's a situation that happens and that other people in the comments are saying, oh yeah, this has happened to me, this has happened to me, this is suggesting anyway that this is a widespread occurrence that a lot of people who are similarly situated are going through. And it's not something that can just be dismissed, it's something that we need to deal with. It's something that we need to see as a problem that needs a proactive solution. And I think that the proactive solution starts with conversations just like we're having now. And I think that ultimately it's going to have to move into public opinion being the controlling factor in what our politicians are doing about this problem, because ultimately the macro solution will be a political solution. Thanks for watching. For access to the full-length conversation and all of the 2-hour-long unedited conversations that I've had on race, click the support link in the description below. Thanks for your support, and see you next time.